8:31. Join me in a pledge to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'm going to read through this next part really fast. If you want me to slow it down so you can understand it better, just let me know. I will. Good evening. Welcome to the Morrison County Board of Adjustment public hearing for today. I have a few items to cover before we get started. Please sign in at the door if you have not done so already, just so we can get your name correct. Put any electronic devices on silent mode. Please note that all testimony is being recorded for the record, not the Morrison County record, but for the Morrison County record. That other one, well, whatever. It is the task of the Board of Adjustment to consider requests for variances and appeals from an order, requirement, or decision made by a county zoning official in accordance with state law and county ordinance. Each request is considered on its own merit. The burden of proving a practical difficulty rests with the applicant. If a variance is granted, it is granted to the land, not to the landowner. Members of the Board of Adjustment are appointed by the County Board of Commissioners with one member from each of the 5 commissioner districts. Land Services staff is here to assist the Board of Adjustment with its duties. Okay, a brief overview of our proceedings. I'll read the variance requests. While reading that request, I would ask the applicant or their representatives and/or to come forward and have a seat at the table in front of the board. Always remember to pull the microphone really close to your mouth and speak into it so we can hear you and so it can be recorded properly. The Land Services staff will provide a staff report for the requested variance and read any correspondence that has been received regarding the request. The applicant and our representatives will then provide input, corrections, concerns, comments. Once the applicant and or representatives have provided their testimony, the board will discuss the request and ask questions of staff or the applicant representatives. Upon completion of board questions, I will ask if there is anyone in the audience wishing to speak for the request. If there is, I would ask that person to come up to the podium, state their name and record or address for the record, and give their testimony. Items to note when providing comment: be factual as possible. Neighborhood endorsement or opposition in itself is not a valid reason to approve or deny an application. In order that the Board of Adjustment will evaluate your comments, we need to know your reasons for input on the application. All statements or questions must be directed to the chair, not to the applicant, nor will the applicant direct questions or statements to the public. Once all comments have been received, any question posed to the chair will be addressed at the close of the public hearing. When all testimony is complete, I will close the public hearing. Once the hearing is closed, there will be no further input from the audience, from the applicant, or staff unless recognized by the chair or if one of the board members wants some type of clarification. The board will review and discuss the findings of fact criteria questions. These findings are a series of questions that the board is required to answer based on Minnesota statute and the requirements of the ordinance. Based upon the answers to those questions, the board will then vote on each question. All questions must be answered in the affirmative by the board to grant the request. The board may also place conditions on the request if it deems it necessary to remediate a negative finding of fact. Once the findings are complete, there will be a motion to approve or deny the request based upon those findings. That will conclude the public hearing, and you can leave if you wish. Any follow-up questions should be directed to Land Services staff during regular public hours. Well, welcome to this public meeting. It's a grassroots democracy. People having input as to what happens next door to them. Thanks for being here, and appreciate your input. Okay, first item on the agenda is Richard and Aaron Beckerman. Please come forward, take a seat. 2769 110th Avenue, Bolus, application for a variance to place a barn within the setback of the road right-of-way located in Two Rivers Township. Okay, when you're ready, just have the mic close to you and state your name for the record.
Aaron Beckerman.
Richard Beckerman.
Mark Brixius.
Okay, and you two are the landowners, and Mark, you are?
With Pilgrims.
Okay, Thank you. Staff report?
Yep, Mr. Chair, this is a variance to construct a poultry barn within setback to a road right-of-way, and this is located in Section 22 of Two Rivers Township. The ordinance reference is Section 1208.1, and that does require a 200-foot setback from the road right-of-way. And here is a plat map of the township, and a red dot is the location of the parcel. And then here's the variance request received from the applicant, along the site drawing also provided by the applicant. Here's an aerial photograph of the parcel outlined in blue, and then some oblique imagery of the property. And then here's site photographs taken on the 17th of March at the site viewing. Again, the property is in Section 22, is in Section 22 of Two Rivers Township. The applicant owns this 20-acre parcel. A Tier 1 poultry feedlot currently exists on the parcel with 65 animal units. The applicant is proposing to construct a second poultry or layer barn south of the existing barn, and the applicant is proposing to place the barn 75 feet from the township road right-of-way. A 200-foot setback is required, so this would be a 125-foot encroachment. All other setbacks would be met, and the feedlot would remain a Tier 1 facility. Due to precautions and biosecurity around avian influenza, the feedlot officer has not performed a compliance inspection of the existing operation. An on-site compost structure for mortalities is present on the site. The applicant attended a dirt meeting, and the original proposal was to encroach on the south property line and the setback from the road right-of-way. And as you know, it's been modified since then. And then actually, I do need to correct because you incinerate mortalities. Is that correct?
Correct.
The applicable comprehensive land use plan goals is agriculture A1, objective 1, objective 4 and 8, and then goal A2, A3, and A4. And then under A4, objectives 1 and 3. And then the comprehensive water plan goals and objectives is groundwater, goal 1 and 2. And the surface water goal, objective A. And then the land use and development goal, objective A. A suggested condition, if this is approved, would be a 50-foot permanent grass buffer shall be planted and maintained around the perimeter of the new barn. 27 notices were sent, and then I've got a couple of correspondence for this one. The first one is from Two Rivers Township. I believe I had emailed that to you, but I will read it for the record. To whom it may concern, the township has received information regarding an application for a variance on behalf of Richard and Eric Beckerman. At our March 7th, 2023 meeting, the town board unanimously agreed that they are in favor of the Beckerman's variance request, including additional driveway approaches with culverts and grade as regulated by Morrison County, as well as a proposed second chicken barn facility within the setback of the road right-of-way. We ask that the Morrison County Planning Commission also favor this request as we try to keep our township agricultural businesses thriving as well as keeping it rural. Thank you for consideration in this matter. Okay, and then we did receive a statement from Dean and Jessica Cook, and that's, we received that today. We, Dean and Jessica Cook, live at 2389 110th Avenue in Bolus, Minnesota. We are concerned about the variance being requested for additional chicken barns. As it stands right now, the existing chicken barn draws an incredible amount of flies to our property. If another chicken barn is built, it will only draw more flies and have a negative effect on our outdoor quality of life. Another consideration is the whole block that we live on has residential homes and crop fields. The chicken barns will decrease our neighborhood's property value. One last thing to take into consideration is the owner of the chicken barn doesn't live where we do. Therefore, the severity of the fly issue may not be known. It doesn't seem reasonable to build or approve more chicken barns when the current barn is creating enough of a problem for those of us living around it. And I'm going to pass this down because there were some attachments with this. And so I'll need it back, but I'm just gonna send it down so you can take a look at the maps. And that was it for public comment. And then here are finding of fact and decision questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Applicants have any response to that or anything to add to that report?
In pertaining to the fly issue, the older barns are way worse than the newer barns, I believe. And this old barn would not be permanent, which it's already 47 years old. It's not gonna last forever. So for the family's future, we're looking to build a new barn. That way, once the old one is no longer able to be run for breeder purposes, we have a future for our family.
And as far as the comment of not living there, we have a camper and we spend a good chunk of the summer there. So we are aware that the flies are an issue, and we do, as far as trying to get them under control, we follow Pilgrim's.
Okay.
Yeah, unless, Mark, would you have anything to add for flies?
Yeah, I mean,
really?
we really are aware of the issue. We are mitigating it as best we can with fly poison and traps and things. I mean, but like Rick said, the new barns are completely sealed. We have an open air barn right now, so we can only do so much with that one. Once they're sealed, they're definitely a lot better.
Thank you. Perhaps as their consultant, as their field representative for the company, could you address the issue of the flies, how a new barn is better, what you can do to reduce what's already there, or whatever?
So, flies breed with moisture. New barns have new water systems, for instance, and it's a single-story concrete floor, so it is more conducive to controlling flies and reducing, moisture issues. Flies can be a biosecurity concern, so we do actively mitigate flies in the barns.
For your own benefit?
Yes, it's in everybody's best interest to keep the fly population to a minimum.
Okay. Anything else to add to the staff report at this time? Okay. Board members, questions?
Mr.
John?
Chair,
Go ahead.
can you pull question for Amy, can you pull the map up here? We're referencing 125-foot total variance. And you're talking about taking mature trees out of the pasture. Where does that actually land approximately? Not that this is,
Do you want a different image?
I'm trying to get a sense. That's good, perfect. Where are we coming at with the 125? If we were to go 125 back and meet all setbacks, where approximately does that put you in that pasture? And how many trees?
You want me to show you up?
Yes,
on the TV
please.
screen? To the setback, it would put the barn roughly right here on the end of the barn, but then if we need to have roughly a 80 to 100-foot pad on the end for clean-out purposes and truck turnaround, so that would encompass this whole area here.
Okay, and is there
Yep.
anything specific?
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Sean.
Is there anything specific in the contract with Pilgrims that puts the location of the barn at an advantage, or is there a requirement?
Our whole thought process was the closer we can keep it to the road, the ease of the semis being able to pull in and out for egg pickup, and also for feed truck drivers to get in and out, and just the ease of them being able to get back on the main road was my whole thought process on that.
Okay,
So working with FSA, and they had an issue about taking out too many mature trees. So we're kind of trying to balance that with where we can put the barn.
did they tell you why?
It was what the heck was it? Yeah, there's a endangered bat in Minnesota, and by taking out trees could potentially be taking out that environment. I do not remember the name of the bat, but that's basically their concern for pulling out any mature trees.
Okay? Thank you.
On that same subject, as long as you're on it, you were concerned about a bit of a wetland there, of a natural spring coming out of that slope, and of course the slope itself. I mean, you're going to be farther away from that with this approach than meeting the setback. How else do you propose to protect that area?
We actually had a wetland determination done through FSA and Soil and Water. And they were talking about I believe it was a 1 foot high berm with a 3-to-1 grade that goes around the barn to basically encase the water. So the water would sit there and dry up instead of running down the hill into the pond.
Okay, thank you. Also, I mean, on site, we discussed a water management plan, but maybe you could review that, but I assume most of the water is going to flow off the roof and go straight down and not even, I mean, run any farther than that. But address that if you could.
There's, a lower spot in the field where typically if we get a freak 1 or a 6-inch rainfall, the majority of it runs in there, but otherwise the majority of the water is just gonna stay on the field and soak in. It's not an overly heavy soil, so it will soak in or be able to evaporate fairly reasonably.
Okay, so there are some shallow basins that will collect water. That's good to know.
Yeah, and as pertaining to the 50-foot grass buffer, we're more than happy with that. Only the first 20 to 25 feet around the barns would be for the road for the trucks to drive on, just so they're not tearing up the soil. And then beyond that, if you would request or require that 50-foot grass strip would not be a problem.
Thank you. And also, at the site, you stated that you're probably going to put the whole field into grass. Is that correct?
Yeah, our plan is to go with the grass hay.
And that would further improve it. But this 50 permanent feet, when if you ever tilled up that grass, you couldn't till up this 50 feet of permanent turf that's in place.
Correct, and if that's what is required, we have no problems with that.
Okay, thank you. Others have questions? Clint?
Yeah. Can you pull up like the area map, like neighbors and everything?
Is most zoomed out?
Yeah. I was just wondering where the neighbor that wrote in about the flies, where they're located.
Mr. Chair, let me go over to Beacon, because I don't have a great image of that, so let me just pull that up for you.
Well, Amy's pulling that up. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, go ahead, Marv.
first on the fly control being the issue, manure management is huge with fly control. So when you have a clean out in the barn, how many days before it's typically all your manure gone? And you had like 4 individuals for your manure to go in manure management. Would you discuss that, please?
Yeah, we have, working with FSA, we're gonna have a manure management plan, and within the 7 years that we've had the existing barn, within anywhere from 5 to 8 days, the manure usually is always gone. They're very quick with usually picking it up before we even have it completely cleaned out. They're usually there already loading off-site just to get it out as fast as possible, because it's dry when we push it out, fairly dry, and if it would rain, it would just be more work for them hauling, so they're pretty active about getting off as fast as possible.
So that would help with fly control. I have a couple more questions, or did you want to go? Okay, first, we were talking about the distance over the old barn versus the new barn. If I'm correct, the statement you made, the old barn is now 55 feet from the road, correct?
Yeah, on the aerial view, it's like 55 to 58 feet from the road right of way.
And you're proposing the new barn 75 feet, correct?
Correct.
And, I know it's my own personal opinion, when we talked about the 200-foot road setback, that's what was adopted. I don't necessarily agree with it, and I understand on main trunk roadways, but I had had a conversation with a few township individuals on their opinion. And one thing that they were concerned first about was having adequate approaches not to damage the road. And it sounds like you have them in play here. So if this barn were to be built, you would have two approaches and they would adequately support and not damage that road. Is that correct?
Correct. We have a rough map from what we tried to do on the computer. It's not 100% correct, but it'll kind of show you the gist of what we're planning, if
Okay.
it would help.
Okay, yep. And another thing that you were talking about earlier, I noticed on your map, you had originally asked for 100 foot, now you dropped down to 75 at the site. I believe you said that part of the reason you did that is on that far end, the wetland, the spring and everything else on that end, and you wanted to do what you thought made the most amount of sense for that property, not to damage the wetlands, go into wetlands, and that was part of your practical difficulty. Am I correct in that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Clarification on one point. Now, the manure has to, I mean, isn't that your standard of Pilgrim's Pride, that it has to be out of there in a certain number of days before you repopulate? Or so?
Yes, the manure needs to be removed before we put birds back on the site.
So there is enforcement of that. I mean, there is no manure that's going to sit for very long, because that
Correct.
would cost money. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Go ahead, Clint.
Okay. So my question was, how far away was that neighbor? And we found out it's about a quarter mile away with the flies, okay? So I don't really have questions, but I got some observations when I was looking through at our site visit, which Dave forgot to mention. I asked the question about that wetland to the west, if they come up with some kind of plan to divert that water away, and you did. You know, you talked about a berm to go around, so great, because what that does, it helps answer a couple of these criterias on here. And then one of them, when I'm looking through in our ag zoning, like our objectives and stuff and goals, one of them that I was having a tough time with, and it gets answered actually by putting 2 driveways in. One is ensure the county policies and ordinance do not restrict farming practices except as necessary to ensure compliance with law or to protect public health and safety. Okay, so you would think being closer to the road, we're gonna have a problem with safety. By putting them 2 driveways in and making that turn like you were talking about coming in and stuff, that mitigates my concern for safety. It actually makes it more safer.
Okay.
Okay, so that, to me, that helps me say, yeah, he meets that objective. And then, the other one was, talking about vegetative buffers to, water, and we don't want to worry about erosion or sensitive areas with that spring in there. And to me, that looks like, when I look on the map and put the layout of the contours and the way the water runs, that whole area west of your barn is almost like a waterway at a certain time of the year. So I think when you decided, when I mentioned that at the site visit about putting a berm in to divert that water around and get it out in the fields instead of dumping into that wet area, I think that helps me answer this question too. So I think with that, it just helps me look through and kind of, you meet all the goals and objectives when them 2 things are done. So that's just more of an observation than it is a question. So that's all I had, Dave.
Thank you, Clint. Any more input? We ready for public input? If there is any public out there that's wanting to input on this, for or against, please come forward, state your name for the record.
Marcy Kudrowski.
And Jay Kudrowski.
See.
Amy, could we get up that? that aerial that we had, that I had sent you with the whole neighborhood, and they were
Oh,
tagged with the house,
Packet that went by.
with the homes on the whole neighborhood.
I brought it back to.
okay. The one that was, for Dean and Jessica Cook?
No, those are ours.
Oh.
None of those.
Oh, this was all bundled together, so I didn't realize
Okay,
these were
yeah,
separate.
sorry, but
Okay,
the
so I
aerials were-
apologize, I did not scan these in, because I thought this was part of their,
okay.
I thought this was part of their comment, and so I thought they were all together.
Okay, if we
So
could
I
just,
don't have an, I can,
if we could just pass it around
yeah, I can
on the
pass
board there.
it.
Thank you.
Go back to that screen that I had you pull up.
Yeah, I can, well, this is what they're showing, but,
You guys look at that while they talk.
okay, I've got them passed down.
Mr. Chair, we live just south of the proposed building site. My parents owned the property to the north at the time the existing barn was built. At that time, 110th Avenue was used as a field road and was only improved up to the existing barn at the time it was built. There are many new homes on 110th Avenue now. Also, much of 20th Street to the south feeds on to 110th Avenue to outlet out to 21. Over the years, the traffic has increased very substantially. As the prior owner of this existing barn, I found it a challenge to be in such close proximity to the road. Congestion with semi-trucks backing onto the road or even parking on the road was not that unusual. In the earlier years, they used straight vans to pick up the eggs, and later on, it became, or the limited setback became a challenge when they switched to semi-trucks for the egg pickup.
And I did hear that you addressed some of those concerns, but I might also comment as far as, township and road maintenance there. I can't say that I feel our road is well-maintained. We have culverts on the south end of 110th Avenue that we've requested be addressed. But, it's not pertaining to the barn, I'm just saying, double speak a little bit, I guess, but, in late 2015, we contemplated shutting down the existing barn due to health issues. We were approached by the applicant about purchasing the property. The applicant and us mutually agreed upon where the land was split off. More land was put on the south end of the property to allow for a potential home site, as we were not ready to sell our entire property at that time. There was no mention of operating two barns at the time. On February 16th, the applicant stopped by our home and informed us of his desire to add an additional barn and that a variance had been applied for. That same evening, we called the applicant and offered available land to better meet the setbacks and that would also preserve the south end of the property for a home site or for home site possibilities. This offer would also preserve the field land as much as possible. On February 17th, we went to Planning and Zoning to verify that our offer will work for the proposed building area. The county feedlot officer confirmed that the alternate location will work. We followed that up with a visit to the Soil and Water Office. They also confirmed that this option would be plausible. On February 20th, per our request, the applicant returned a phone call. We informed him that we went to the county and verified compliance for the alternate possible site, and that the setback could be further off the road and preserve the remainder of the property for a home site. There was no further discussion. some additional comments unless you had anything to say about that, Jay.
Amy, could you please put up the shot you had up there before of just the building site there?
That one?
Yes. So, I own this land just west of the barn here. Piece, if you look under. So we proposed, if we either do a land exchange or if we sold it to him, either way, we were agreeable to it, that he could get the barn. There's actually, we checked with soil and water. This is higher ground right here. I've lived there for my whole life. I know there's a strip of land in here. This pothole drains from these springs here. There's a strip of higher ground that runs right along this fence line back to here. And then from this field up, the elevation goes up a lot. We checked with soil and water for setbacks on both deeds. I had to hand out, then you can pass them, of what we had proposed. It was an option that we had given, so. To help meet a better setback for ordinance.
I guess the whole idea behind what we're proposing is looking forward, and if the plan is really reasonable, because being that the variance goes with the land and not the owners, how does this work for the neighborhood if at some point they no longer, for some reason, can't take care of this facility or choose to sell it? It doesn't leave a nice spot, as a lot of the area behind to the west of the field, there are springs in there on the south side, up in the woods. So, I mean, that's really not an ideal building spot up there either. So it was just how this would look going forward. And also, I guess the question number 3, will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? And I guess my thought on that is farms in the area are comprised of buildings with a home site. A feedlot-only property would be somewhat out of place where we are. The proposed placement of the barn does not leave a reasonable or attractive site for a home to be added to the property, whether now or, as I mentioned earlier, for a future owner. This is not in alignment with Objective 3 and also goal areas A2 and A3. The applicant does not reside on the property and is not subjected to the issues of the feedlots as worded from the comprehensive plan. We would welcome the applicant to move on to the site in order to have firsthand knowledge of management issues. This will minimize conflicts and issues, again, referring to Objective 3. I would just also like to note there that, you know, we did manage the barn for the years that we owned it and some years prior to that, and Jay would go to great lengths because I didn't appreciate flies every time I opened the door. And so I know it's not that I'm scared of flies. I grew up on a dairy farm and I farmed as well in the chicken barn actively. You know, I helped with clean out and machinery operation and all parts of this farm. But I can attest to that there has been an uptick, and that's why I do feel that in order to maintain harmony within the neighborhood, that is a component. You know, I mean, there's residences here, and if we didn't have all these people, new people moving in, we also wouldn't have more people for the school districts, and then what? You know, I mean, we have a lot of large farms taking over and not as many rural properties. I think we need to still maintain that balance and what that provides for our small towns. We've seen a lot of small towns that just are dying out and hardly any businesses left there as well. So, yeah, I guess balance would be key here. Also, question number 4, pertaining to your questioning, number 4 is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property. I guess as stated earlier, you know, I mean, it was agreed upon and not known at that time that, you know, I guess how you say this, did they outgrow this property, or, you know, I don't know. 110th Avenue has a ridge on the west side behind all properties. There are wetlands dispersed throughout, including both neighboring properties. It would be difficult for anyone on 110th Avenue to fit in a building of this size. The applicant mentions the size of the building twice in his application. The building is oversized for the available usable area of this lot, and although it's 20 acres, and I understand that's what, you know, is permitted within the comprehensive plan, but we're really not dealing with 20 acres of level land, and also with the ridge. And I think this is shared by both, you know, throughout 110th Avenue. That's why it's become a reasonable place where many new homes have been built. Did you have any? So, in closing, I guess we wish no ill will to the applicants, only that the boundaries within the comprehensive plan are applied fairly to all, and I'm not just speaking on our behalf, but the neighborhood as a whole, and not everybody wrote in, but, you know, just some discussion, and we just didn't really want it to turn into an attack. It's not an attack, it's just, that's balanced and fair for all. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Would you hold on for just a second? Is there anybody else that's going to be speaking from the public? Okay. I might recall you back up here to the microphone, but thank you for now.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other public input?
Good afternoon. My name is Shannon Wetstein. I'm the district manager at the Morrison Soil Water Conservation District. And I'm here tonight to basically encourage you to recommend the variance. So the reason that the applicant is proposing the barn at the location on the property is because we all know that farmers farm as far as they can until they can't. And that line on the western edge of that field is where it probably was not farmable, and it is most likely very wet. And so the applicant has a practical difficulty in that they are having to push the barn closer to the road so that their back end of that thing isn't sitting in a wetland. And between the length of the barn and the skirt on the back, the apron, they would be in the wetland area. At the dirt meeting, we talked about some other alternative placements, but ultimately they can't move north because they're getting into wetland areas up there as well. And so this proposal that you see is due to the practical difficulties on the site. The last comment that we just heard from the neighbors of, you buy my property and then put the barn there, I think is making sausage. These applicants are, this is their property, this is what they own, this is what they can work with. Offering a swap, to me, seems completely unreasonable, honestly. And if it was something that the applicants wanted to do, I would say, again, putting a barn in that corner is not going to be able to meet the wetland setbacks. And realize you've come to our office, but looking at the maps, talking to Alan today as well about this property, meeting the setbacks for wetlands and the building placement in there is not going to work. Now, yes, at the request, if these folks ever bought that property and wanted us to come out there and mark a wetland boundary, we would be happy to do that. But I'm just going off of looking at the wetland maps and the certified wetland determination that was done by NRCS and kind of the elevations of the property. Putting it on that northern neighboring property is not even something that should be considered tonight. So I'm happy to answer any other questions, but those were my comments. I do believe that the applicant has practical difficulty with the placement because of the wetlands on the western edge of the property. Thank you.
Okay, before you leave, are there any questions that you want to direct at Shannon?
Mr. Chair, so I read this earlier, and if you wanted to reference it about buffer recommendations, did you want to comment a little bit about your recommendations? Is buffer with the grassland all the way around it?
Yes, thank you for letting me comment. Mr. Chair, so during the DRT process, we did discuss having a 50-foot buffer around the building that would remain in grass, obviously outside of the drive area. And that's something that I've recommended in the past on bigger buildings like that, and that's to protect the agricultural land around it from erosion. And since this is their property, I'm sure that's what they want to do. But I also just clarify, the applicant said that they were willing to put in a berm around the building. I would say that wouldn't be entirely necessary. I think that the apron on the western edge of the barn, where the manure would be temporarily stacked, would have the potential in a rainstorm to cause maybe some manure leaching into that wetland. So if even a temporary berm were put up during the period where the manure is stacked there, that would be sufficient to kind of address that need. And our office would recommend, that in that placement just around that apron to address any leaching during that time. But since their management is cleaning the barn once a year, having a permanent berm there, I think, may create some difficulties for them in the case that they don't have manure stored. Now it rains. Now they've got water moving into their barn, which is going to produce more maggots, more flies, more. You're trying to keep water out of the barn, not lead it in. So if there were something, I would say that is probably a best practice, and it could also be achieved by maybe a double silt fence or some other temporary sort of erosion control. Just like if you were a contractor stacking a big heap of class 5 right outside a wetland, they would either have to do a temporary berm or they would have to do a double silt fence. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for letting me clarify on that.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. Any other questions for Shannon before we move on? Okay, thank you for being here, Shannon. Okay, is there any other public comment at this time? Any other public comment? Yes, go ahead, sir.
Ron Lenners, I'm supervisor for Two Rivers, and with this 75-foot, instead of that 200-foot setback, we are totally okay with the 75-foot. It would be totally safe and for the township and the people that use that road.
Okay. Before you leave, I just, quick question, if the road would have to be widened or something, you'd still have room for that? I assume you've considered all that?
Oh, yes, for a township road, it's just an average township road. It's probably better than a lot of township roads. And I think there's 4 families that live on 110th that would have to drive past the chicken barn, but then most of the traffic goes on 20th Street. And the traffic should be no problem.
Okay, thank you. And the approach designs, are those okayed by you or by the
Yes.
county, or both?
That, with 2 driveways, that would make it way, way better, as your chairman said. Yes.
All right,
Thank you.
yep, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yep,
I also would like to comment on that road. I've known that road since I was a kid, and as Jay and Marcy stated, it was a cow path in the past, and the township spent a lot of dollars building it up there, and he said like there's maybe 4 homes back there, and there's an alternative route on that, so it is not that well traveled, but it is traveled. But yeah, it was not very long ago, basically a cow path.
thank you, Marv. All right, any other comments? Any other public input? Any other public input? Third and final time, any other public input? If none, we'll close the public input. Thank you. So are we ready for the questions? Oh, yes, yes. For the record, site visits. Sorry I didn't get those in, and they were done on the 17th, and all of the board members were present, as well as Amy, so. And if I forget, insert them into the next one also. Same thing. All right, other comments before we go on to the questions? Okay. I always start out with Marv. I guess we'll do that again. Marv, is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan?
I believe it is, and then I'm going to read off here our A1 objective: to ensure that the county provides and protects areas most suitable for strong and stable agricultural industry, including but not limiting to crop production, animal husbandry, dairy and meat production, pasture lands, or other similar areas. So we are an ag community. This is ag area. We heard comments about flies issues. We are in an ag area. That is to be expected. People build homes out in the country. They don't like the smells of manure. Tough. You're out in the country, that's what it is. And it sounds like you do a great job with your manure management, and otherwise, it is definitely in harmony with the general purpose of Morrison County Land Use Ordinance.
Okay, anybody else like to add to that? I'd just like to add that they're working with Morrison County Soil and Water Conservation District. I think I'd like us to condition it that they follow their recommendations as far as water management plans, and also, of course, we'd be considering the 50-foot permanent buffer at the same time as a condition.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I can interrupt, I just want to remind you of the nexus that we have. This is a variance request to encroach on the setback from a road.
Sure.
The recommendations of the Soil and Water Conservation District are actually on the other end of the barn to protect the wetland area, which does not have a nexus.
But the other end of the barn is only closer to that wetland because of the setback infringement. If we could meet the, well, you can't meet that, so.
Well, it would push it
If we
farther
could
back
put the
in.
barn in a different place, I mean, it's really about location of the barn. Sorry to argue with you, but my
I'm not
considered
arguing,
opinion is
it's up to you.
there
I'm
is a
here to guide
nexus in
you.
my mind. The barn wouldn't be there without that variance, and the consequence of the variance is that you have to address the west end of the barn. And it's all about the west end of the barn, I think, where you're at.
Yep.
My opinion. Yeah, I guess I'd just like to say that I'm considering that as a condition, that continue to work with Morrison County Soil and Water District on that water plan, and also the permanent buffer. That means permanent, and 50 feet beyond the driveway, which you already agreed to. Okay, thank you. Then with those in mind, it would be in harmony, in my opinion. Any other input on number 1? Okay, number 2, is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the land use ordinance? Brent?
Well, yes, I think it's already, it's already ag use in ag land. But what's not permitted here is the, building a new structure that close to the road, so they're looking for the setback. The setback is not to encroach on the township road, but the township is in favor of it, as we heard from him tonight. So I think the applicant is proposing to use it in a reasonable manner.
Thank you. Anything else to add to that?
I'll add something.
Okay, go ahead, Clint.
So just to kind of go off what Amy was trying to say was, we got a 200-foot setback from the road right away. And, they're asking for 125 feet, of relief. That's quite a bit, okay? And you set a precedence for that because we have 200 feet. Now if we're going to take 125 off, and I don't think lightly of that. I think when I look at the whole spectrum of it, a family that it's in ag, they want to make a living off of their land. They only own 20 acres, okay? So you got to look at it, the weighing it out, is the 125 feet of relief worth what's at stake? Not every situation, I don't believe it is. So, yeah, we set a standard by if we give them 125 feet relief, now we're going to be setting a standard to do that for every one of these. I don't think so. I think this property, the way it is, and when we get to the practical difficulty with the west end of the barn, that does dictate what happens on the roadside. And I think 125 feet of relief is quite a bit. But I think for this family to be able to farm the land they own in ag zoning area, I think it is reasonable to ask for the 125 feet. A different one, maybe it's not. But I think in this case, when we're looking for a reasonable, using this land reasonable, I think to be able to operate, the barns are set size. It ain't like you can just shorten it up. They're chicken farmers. They want to continue to be. If you're going to keep moving forward, it's just something that has to happen. So I do think 125 feet is a lot, but in this situation, I think it's reasonable.
Oh, well said. Thank you, Clint. Other input on number 2, reasonable use? If not, we'll go on to number 3. Will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? I guess I would be starting with that. Yeah, there is already a poultry barn, same distance from the road, and down the road, it'll look much like that barn, only you'll be able to see the whole thing. It goes back much farther. It's the essential character of the neighborhood should be ag and rural residents with a proper setback. The nice thing about this variance is that they're respecting the setback to neighbors' properties, especially to the south, as much as possible, and allowing them to use their land in the future and meet that 600-foot setback to this barn. So it maintains essential character. It also does respect the neighbor's property as much as possible. I think we should address somewhere in these comments the proposal by the other neighbor. I think Shannon pointed out very well that it's on paper it looks good, but it's another can of worms that just can't, impossible to address at this night. Possible wetlands. Yeah, I don't know how you do that property switch. making sausage, so I
Well,
think
that-
we need to discount
Mr.
that.
Chair, that's not even in the proposal.
No, I know,
So-
but he doesn't have any other alternative, is
Yeah.
what I'm getting at. But thanks for pointing that out. It's not in the proposal, but that isn't a viable alternative to meet other setbacks. Okay, anything else on number 3? Okay, number 4 is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property. Clint?
So, when you get 20 acres of farmland and zoned in ag, a chicken barn like this can be put up on 20 acres of land, okay? There isn't a lot of things in ag that you can make a living off on 20 acres of land. A poultry barn is one of them, possibly a hog barn. So, for being in ag, and they want to make this stay in ag and make a living off their land, their 20 acres they own, they're in the poultry business, they're putting a new poultry barn in. Them are set standards by where they contract through to sell, basically work for and partner with. So you can't change that. That's not even an option. So to get the barn to fit in, they meet every single setback except for the road right away, okay? And I said earlier, 125 feet is quite a bit of relief to ask for. But in this situation, I believe it works because we're saving wetland on the other end. You get to the road, I really truly believe when you put the 2 driveways in, it makes it even safer. The way it's going to be turned, talked about different practices for water. So I do think there is a practical difficulty here for somebody to make a living on their 20-acre farm. To be able to put a poultry barn in and stay in the business, it cannot fit without getting this relief from this setback. I think the way the land is, yes, it's unique because of the wetland on the other end, the spring that's in there, and they've done, I've asked them a couple things, and they checked into putting a berm up, and I didn't mean put a berm around the whole farm, I just meant on that end. Sounds like they're talking about it, they got that figured out, to control that. But I do think the practical difficulty in this circumstance is unique to the property, that to be able to make this a viable agricultural piece of farmland, that wetland being there and just to meet all the setbacks, that's, I don't know, it's a lot of mumbo jumbo here, but you get the drift.
Okay, thank you, Clint. Anything else in question number 4? Okay, we'll move on to number 5, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners. John?
I think this was hammered home by Clint just now, and we heard from Soil and Water earlier in the discussion. It's the wetland on the west end. It's nature. Nothing more.
Anybody else have anything to add?
It might, Mr. Chair, it might also be just by Pilgrim's barn size. There only is one size. So it isn't like you can downsize it to make it fit.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'd also like to add that the applicant's answers to all 6 of these questions are very good answers that could be used for the record also. His answer number 5 is we're asking for variance because of the shape of our land limits the location options for a new barn, the required size. Yes, the need for the variance is created by the shape of our land and the size of the barn. So, and I'd agree with that. Also, just for the record and for the public, if they could meet all the setbacks, like Ken pointed out earlier, they'd just get an over-the-counter permit for this, and there wouldn't be a public hearing, and it'd just be permitted right over the counter. So, but because of the uniqueness of their land, it does need a variance. Okay, nothing else on number 5? Number 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Marv?
I believe it does. I mean, they contacted Soil and Water dealt with Pilgrim's Pride, looked at different alternatives. They sat in a dirt meeting talking about switching different angles of the building here, and they wanted to conserve more ag property. So they've looked at many different items here, and, when the neighbors operated the property, apparently they must have looked into it, talking to Shannon about that's too wet to do this. So I believe they did research, and it was much more than economics.
Okay, any additions to that? Okay, if not, are we ready to vote on the questions? Okay, let's proceed to vote then. Is the request in harmony with the general purposes intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? Again, this is with the conditions of a 50-foot permanent buffer outside of the roadway around the barn and following Morrison County's Soil and Water Conservation District's watershed plan, or whatever, recommendations. So, all right, we're voting on that. Okay, we'll start out with that. Is request in harmony with the general purpose intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
And John?
Yes.
Number 2 is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the land use ordinance. Brent?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
And John?
Yes.
And Marvin?
Yes.
Number 3, what will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
And Brent?
Yes.
Number 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to the circumstances unique to the property? Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
And myself is yes. Number 5, is the need for the variance created by the actions other than the landowner or prior landowners? John?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Myself is yes. And Clint?
Yes.
Number 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
And John?
Yes.
Okay, all 6 questions have been answered to the affirmative. Is there a motion to
Mr. Chair,
this?
I make a motion with the 2 conditions that we approve this application.
I'll second that. Is there any discussion on the motion? If no discussion, we'll proceed with a vote. It'll be a roll vote. All in favor say aye, opposed say nay. Marvin?
Aye.
Brent?
Aye.
Myself is aye. Clint?
Aye.
And John?
Aye.
Thank you. Any questions, contact Land Services. Okay, next on the agenda. Can't copy that. Okay, the next item on the agenda is Dwayne and Paula Meyer, 13439 241st Avenue, Piers. Application for a variance to allow an accessory structure to exceed the allowable square footage located in Agram Township near Piers Fish Lake. Well, you don't have very many friends, I guess.
Nope, I don't. I'm usually sleeping by now, too.
Please state your name for the record.
Dwayne Meyer.
Okay. And you live at 13439?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, are you ready for the staff report?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is a
Thank you.
variance to expand a nonconforming structure located in Section 13 of Agram Township. The ordinance references for this request is Section 301, 301.6A, and 706.2. Here's a plat map of Agram Township, and the red dot is location of the parcel. And then here's the variance request received from the applicant, and a site drawing also provided by the applicant. And then here's an aerial photograph of the parcel, and then also some oblique imagery of the parcel. Here are some photos taken at the site visit on the 17th of March. Again, the property is in Section 13 of Agram Township, and this 70.52 acre property is dually zoned agriculture and shoreland due to its proximity to Piers Lake. The applicant lives on the property, and the development on the property is on the highest point, and the remainder is cropped with center pivot irrigation. The original home was built in 1940 with subsequent permitted additions throughout the years. In 2002, a 48 by 105 by 25, which is 5,040 square feet, pole shed was permitted. Both structures are within the shoreline zone portion of the property. And then here's an aerial photo with the zoning district turned on. And then here's a photo also with the zoning district and then also the elevation contours. The road that runs through the property is not claimed by the township, and it is a private road, so no right-of-way exists and no setback from it is enforced, and that is a letter from the township indicating that. At the time of permitting the pole shed in 2002, there was a height limit on accessory structures of 18 feet and a height limit for principal structures and agricultural buildings of 25 feet. There was no limitation of square footage for accessory buildings at the time. In 2010, the land use control ordinance was amended and the new requirement was changed to the following, which is the standard today, which requires all principal structures in the shoreline district must not exceed 25 feet in height, and all accessory structures must not exceed 18 feet in height, 10-foot sidewalls, and 1,300 square feet, unless the accessory structure is located twice the structural setback from the ordinary high water level and side lot lines. No accessory structure may exceed a peak height of 25 feet nor 3,000 square feet. The existing pole building became a legal nonconformity at that time because it is over the allowable 3,000 square feet. The applicant is requesting a variance to construct a 36 by 48 addition onto the existing shed for a total structure square footage of 6,768. Since the structure is more than 150 feet from the lake, the overall height of 25 feet is not an issue. However, the square footage limit is exceeded. From a property line setback perspective, a large building envelope exists on the property, both within the shoreline and agricultural zoned portions of the property. Here's a figure that shows that buildable area and building envelope with some of the other land features on it. The applicable comprehensive land use plan goals is natural resources and open spaces, goal C2, shoreline development, goal D1, and then in agriculture, A1, objective 1. And then the comprehensive water plan goals and objectives, surface water goal, objective B, land use and development goal, objectives B and D. 72 notices were sent, no comment was received prior to the public hearing. And then here are your finding of fact and decision questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Amy. Does the applicant have anything to add to that?
No, nope.
All right. Does anybody on the board have questions for the applicant or staff? Okay.
Mr. Chair, just one real quick question.
Go ahead, Marv.
If I understood it correctly, you had said was it right after that building was built or that changed, made it a nonconformity, or was it when it built in nonconformity?
No, so the pole shed was permitted and built in 2002, and then the ordinance changed in 2010, so 8 years later.
8 years later, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Marv. Anybody else? Anybody else?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Brent.
maybe just a question for the applicant here. The need for the extension on there for building on and adding on, maybe you could explain that. And then if it were to go somewhere else on the property, what type of land would it be taking up?
Well, it's just for storage. I also farm too. As far as putting it somewhere else, it would take agricultural land away.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brent. Any other questions? We're ready for public input. Is there any public input at this time? Don't twitch even, we'll call on you. Any public input at this time? Any public input? No public input. The meeting is closed to public input. Ready for the questions then? Okay. Shuffle of paper here, get to the right one. Looks like we're starting with Brent on the first question. Is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use ordinance and comprehensive plan. Brent?
I think it is. He's coming to the Board of Adjustment for the strictest interpretations and rules of the county. It's his only way to get relief, and it's his right to come before us, and so it is in harmony in that regard to come forward.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else like to add to that? Go ahead.
Mr. Chair.
Yep, go ahead.
Just to note, he had 70 and a half acres. The addition that he's putting on is very small in comparison to the land mass. Yes, part of it's in ag and part is in shoreland. That's why he's here for that. So we allow buildings like this all over. If it wasn't for the shoreland, it wouldn't even be an issue. But with the shoreland, it is an issue. But I think with the total amount of land and everything, and you look at what our ordinance states and our comprehensive plan, I think it does meet in there, being the locality of where it is in the shoreland.
Okay. Anybody else? I'd just like to add that ag use is allowed in shoreland. From any passerby, it would be hard for them to differentiate where the shoreland is and where the ag land is. So it is in shoreland, that's for sure, but it is used for ag as is permitted, and the proposed use is also for ag use too, for his small business and for his ag purposes, ag storage. So it certainly fills out that intent of the comprehensive plan. Also, I'd like to add that all of the answers that the applicant has to the questions, these 6 questions are good answers. So we could fall back on them a bit too if needed. So anybody else on number 1? Number 2 is the applicant proposing to use the land in a reasonable manner not permitted by the land use ordinance. I start out with that one. Maybe I've already answered that with my first answer. It's use the property in a reasonable manner. Yes, it's already being used for ag. This is continued ag use from any passerby from the lake who have been notified and have not commented. They obviously see no change in the way the property is being proposed to be used and the way it is already used, or the way it'll look different from the way it already looks. So it is a reasonable request from that standpoint. Anybody else like to add to number 2? Number 3, will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? Clint?
Yes, most definitely. There's ag zoning, like we said before, all around it. It splits his property in half. That basically pretty much that 70 acres in half between shoreland and ag. So for people, the passerbyers, they're not even gonna know the difference. This proposed variance is 530 feet from the nearest dwelling, 400 feet from the lake lots. Not even from the lake, just from the lake lots. Just to get to the lots, it's 400 feet. When I went on Beacon, I think the closest I could find just with a drawing, which isn't 100% accurate, but that's like 750 feet from the lake. So it's ag all around it, and then you got lake, but he's so far away from the lake and the lake lots that it definitely fits the essential character of the locality with all the ag land and use around there, and then houses. There's a lot of houses up and down that road with story. You go on. I don't know what's that Fish Lake Drive. What's the road that goes north and south there, just to the west? That's
Lake Road?
Lake Road. Okay, Lake Road. You go up there. Every single house has got a shed bigger than he's got. So I mean, it's a house
Mostly
and a
my
shed.
brothers and sisters.
Okay, but whatever. So there is an essential character for the ag and also the rural residents that live there.
Okay. Thank you, Clint. Any addition to that? question number 3? No, we'll go to question number 4. Is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? John?
Well, I think everybody hit this here with both the ag land and the shoreland zoning and the distances and the square footage technically allowed. Those are your circumstances right now. You're following 2 sets of rules and trying to meet up, but agree with everything that was already referenced in the previous questions as well.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Mark.
I'd just add to that, also the loss of valuable ag land if put anywhere else on the property.
Yep. Thank you, Brent. Thank you, John. Anybody else? I'll also like to point out just the proximity of where the shoreland zone ends. It's right in the middle of the applicant's house, which is just, not very far to the south of the proposed project. So it's almost in ag. Makes that kind of unique. Anything else on number 4? Number 5 is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowner. Marv?
Yes, and the reason why is when this shed was built 8 years later, the ordinance had changed, so then it created this issue. And so the ordinance change is what created this. And I will like to also respond that he could build a separate building off to the side, but he would be taking ag property in that per se. This makes the most amount of sense, and it's a flat piece of property, and he's at a well and everything to contend with, but the main reason is the change of ordinance.
Thank you, Marv. Anybody else? I'd just like to add again, the applicant has a good answer to this question also. Number 5, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Brent?
I believe it does. He's got valuable ag land there. He's got irrigation pivots on the land. Putting things in other locations would possibly interrupt with that. This is on the high ground. It's got the least disruption of land occurring for existing. It's flat, it's level up there. Using the highest point, as said already, the location of the sewer and well come into play. And I think I already talked about the loss of ag land.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
I just got the overview, because I forgot to say it earlier. The applicable comprehensive land use goals, I will look through every one of them. There's from DNR to shoreline to ag, surface water goals, land development goals, all in this project. Them are all goals and uses. This project meets every one of them. There isn't one that I can find a problem with, and that's pretty diversified between natural resource and open spaces, shoreline development, ag, and all of our development goals, land use development. So just wanted to put that in there.
Thanks for pointing that out, Clint. All right, anybody else have anything to add before we vote? When we were at the site, I asked you about the vegetative cover that's there around the building, and you said you intended to maintain it as it is. And I don't know that we need to put that in as a condition, but I guess I'd like to, because you intend to do it anyway. Maintain it just like it is, the amount that's there. Is
Yeah,
that reasonable?
It can't change. It's.
Yeah, yeah, it would, yeah. But it's there, and it does provide a service to your building and to your land, prevents any possible, well, whatever. There's no erosion
Might
anyway.
have to put grapes in or something.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not gonna do that.
Yeah, so, I don't know if we need a condition, anybody think we do?
No.
Okay,
No.
all right. Ready to vote? Okay, the, number 1, the request is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinances and Comprehensive Plan? Brent?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Marv?
Yes.
Number 2 is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the land use ordinance. Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Marv?
Yes.
And Brent?
Yes.
Number 3, will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Marv?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
And myself is yes. Is the alleged practical, number 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? John?
Yes.
Marv?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
Number 5 is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners. Marv?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
And John?
Yes.
Number 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Brent?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Marv?
Yes.
All right, all the questions were answered to the affirmative. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve this variance.
I'll second that. Is there any discussion? If none, we'll proceed to vote. A roll call vote. Aye in favor, nay against. Marvin?
Aye.
Brent?
Aye.
Myself is aye. Clint?
Aye.
And John?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, thank
Request
you.
approved.
Yep.
Thank you.
So whenever you're ready for construction, just come on in and apply for your permit. You'll still need the permit to put up the building, so whenever you're ready, just come on in
Can
and
I
do
get
that.
it now, even if I'm not gonna build till May, can I get the permit now?
Yeah, your permit is good for 2 years,
Okay.
so you could stop in tomorrow if you wanted to, so.
Yeah. I just
Okay.
Get it done.
Get her done.
All right, thank you. Next on the agenda, minutes from the previous meeting.
I so make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second that?
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Minutes accepted. Any other items of business on the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Motion is made and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, meeting adjourned at 9:53.